In the quiet neighborhood of Verona, Lila stumbled upon a startling sight in her backyard one misty morning. There was a dog that looked like it didn't have a home, with fur as black as night, standing near her garden shed. It looked straight at her with a serious look. Lila got curious and went closer, but what she saw in the dog's mouth made her feel dizzy, her legs weak, and suddenly, everything went dark. As she started to lose consciousness, what the dog had was so surprising, it stunned her more than she ever could have imagined. When Lila woke up again, she was so confused. She still couldn't believe what she had seen that dog carry into their garden, but deep inside her heart, she knew that it was true. She saw it as a sign, and she was determined to find the dog again. She wouldn't be able to rest before she did so. Over the next few days, Lila did everything she could to track down that dog. She looked for it everywhere, but there was no sign of it. She was almost about to give up when one day it suddenly returned. Lila couldn't believe her eyes, but there was no doubt about it. She knew why the dog had come to her garden. Lila slowly and carefully approached the dog, not wanting to scare it away another time. She would never forgive herself if that happened, but she also never thought this unexpected encounter would end like it did. But what had the dog been carrying in its mouth? Why did it shock Lila so much? And why did the dog come to her garden? The early morning was Lila's favorite part of the day. Her husband had already gone to work and the kids were still asleep, and she enjoyed a cup of coffee as she stared out the window, looking at the sky as it slowly became lighter and lighter. It was completely quiet, except for the birds that were slowly waking from their sleep. Lila enjoyed this while it lasted, because soon there would be chaos. She still had an hour left before it was time to wake the kids. Once she did that, she wouldn't have any moment of rest until she came home from work. She'd have to pull the kids apart, find her son's trousers, search for her daughter's shirt, make sure they eat breakfast in time, and get them in the car by 8 a.m. Total mayhem. Naturally, Lila was as quiet as she could possibly be in the mornings, not wanting to wake anyone and disturb her own peace. She loved her family, but she needed to get some quality time in as well, and the mornings had proved to be perfect for that. And until then, this one particular morning seemed to be the same as all the others. She had read some pages from this book she had picked up recently, and she had picked an outfit for the day. She had several meetings planned at work, and she wanted to make a good impression. When she looked at the clock and saw that she still had 20 minutes left, she decided to water the plants in the backyard. Not expecting anything strange to happen, Lila filled the watering can and opened the kitchen door to the garden. She made her way to the flower patches and hummed softly as she watered all of the plants. Seeing as she was already there, she also picked up some of the dead leaves that had fallen off and trimmed the plants if needed. And then she noticed it. There was a dog in her garden. It stood right by the shed, in the corner, and it didn't move at all. It simply stared at Lila, and Lila stared back. It was quite a large dog, and from the looks of it, it was probably a stray. Lila loved all animals, but she knew that stray dogs could be aggressive at times, so she wanted to tread cautiously. "Hi there, buddy. What are you doing there?" she said in a soft, sweet voice. The dog didn't move, but it did start wagging its tail. This was the sign that Lila needed. This dog wasn't going to attack her. As she slowly approached it, she noticed that it was holding something in its mouth, but she couldn't make out what it was just yet. Lila moved closer to the dog, heart pounding with curiosity. The black dog sat still, its eyes fixed on her as she stepped forward. As she reached out her hand, the dog didn't flinch. It seemed to understand she meant no harm. Lila's gaze then shifted to the object in its mouth, squinting to make out what it could be. The closer Lila got, the clearer the object became. It was shockingly familiar, something she hadn't seen in years but recognized instantly. Her breath caught in her throat as she reached out to the dog, which calmly sat there as if waiting for her to take it. The early morning light glinted off the object, revealing its contours more clearly. The revelation was too much for Lila. Her knees buckled as the world spun around her. She reached out, trying to catch herself, but it was too late. She felt the soft grass against her skin as she fell, the morning dew cooling her face. The dog watched quietly, not moving from its spot as Lila slipped into unconsciousness. "Mom! Mom! Wake up!" Noah's voice pierced the quiet morning air a while later. He knelt beside Lila, shaking her gently. Concern etched his young face as he looked down at his mother, lying on the ground. He called her name again, louder this time, hoping she'd open her eyes. The dog watched from a distance, its tail wagging slowly. Lila's eyes fluttered open to Noah's worried face. "Can you get me a glass of water?" she asked, her voice weak. Noah nodded and ran to the house. Lila sat up slowly, her head spinning. She couldn't remember what had happened. So many questions went through her mind. Why was she outside? And why was she on the floor? Lila slowly sat up and brushed off the dirt, checking her arms and legs for any injuries. Miraculously, she found none, not even a scratch from the tumble she took. She stood up, dusting off her clothes, feeling a bit dazed, but relieved that she was okay. Around her, the garden was quiet, as if nothing had happened at all. Noah rushed back, a bottle of water in his hand, worry etched across his face. "Are you okay?" he asked, scanning her for injuries. Lila accepted the water, nodding. "Yeah, just a bit shaken," she replied, managing a small smile. Noah's presence, filled with concern, was comforting, reminding her she wasn't alone in this strange twist of events. As Lila sipped the water, she tried to piece together how she ended up on the ground. Her mind was foggy, the details elusive, until she looked towards the old shed at the garden's edge. Something clicked in her memory. The shed, the reason she was out here in the first place, held clues to the mystery unfolding. It was time to investigate further. Approaching the shed, Lila was hit by a wave of nostalgia. It was there she remembered the dog, standing next to the shed and keeping its eyes on her, not moving at all. But there was more. An object that seemed oddly familiar, yet out of place in this garden. It had sparked a memory, a crucial piece of this puzzle. However, when Lila turned to point out the dog to Noah, it was gone. There was no sign it had ever been there, no paw prints in the soft earth, no disturbed bushes. It was as if the dog and the object it brought with it were just figments of her imagination. But Lila knew better. Something was amiss, and the answers lay close by, perhaps closer than she realized. Lila resumed searching for the dog, calling out with hope, but it didn't return. She wandered through the garden, hoping for a bark or a whimper in response. Lila checked behind every bush and every tree, her calls becoming more desperate. As time ticked away, she realized the search was futile for now and headed back inside the house, worried but determined. Realizing the time, she hurried to prepare Noah and Carly for school, noticing their lateness. The morning became a whirlwind of toast, backpacks, and misplaced shoes. Lila orchestrated the chaos with a practiced hand, her mind still on the missing dog. As the clock marched on, she pushed the kids towards the door, breakfast in hand, her heart racing to beat the morning bell. Concerned about her ability to drive after fainting, she enlisted their neighbour's help for the school drop-off. She quickly called Mr. Thompson, who lived next door, explaining her situation. To her relief, he immediately agreed to help. Lila gathered Noah and Carly, guiding them next door. She handed them over to Mr. Thompson, who assured her they'd be on time and thanked him for his help. Lila waved her kids off and watched the car disappear around the corner, her worry for the dog momentarily replaced by gratitude for Mr. Thompson's kindness. She knew the kids were in good hands, which allowed her to focus on the next steps. With a brief moment of calm, Lila decided to retrace her steps, hoping for a clue to the dog's whereabouts. With her kids in school, Lila dashed through her garden and down the street, eyes scanning every shadow for the mysterious dog. She whistled softly, the way she did when calling a friend, but only silence answered. With a heavy heart and a glance at her watch, she turned towards her house, knowing she couldn't delay her departure for work any longer. On the bus, Lila sent a quick message to her boss, explaining she'd be late due to an unexpected situation at home. Her boss, always understanding, replied with a gentle reminder that the team was counting on her presentation today. Lila nodded to herself, determined to make up for the time lost in her morning's unexpected adventure. At work, Lila delivered her presentation with practiced ease, earning nods and smiles from all of her colleagues. Yet, as she clicked through slides, her thoughts drifted to the dog. She imagined it exploring her garden, its tail wagging with curiosity. Even as her colleagues applauded, she couldn't help but wonder where the dog had gone. She hoped it would return soon. While tidying her desk, Lila found herself pondering the dog's visit. Had it been looking for something in her garden? Why did it visit her of all people? And where had it found that object that it had been holding in its mouth? These questions circled in her mind like leaves caught in a whirlwind, unresolved and fluttering for attention amidst her daily responsibilities. That evening at home, Lila made tea and stationed herself by the window, occasionally glancing at the garden's gate. She hoped to see the dog, and she was desperate for answers. She just couldn't forget about what she had seen that morning. As the sky darkened, she remained vigilant, a silent guardian of the quiet night, waiting for a sign that might never come. Christopher did share Lila's curiosity, but also saw that the whole thing was making Lila a bit stressed out. So, he proposed to have a cozy night in and watch a movie together, and it helped. Lila was finally able to relax and stop thinking about the dog for a minute. Noah, however, was glued to the living room window, keeping an eye out for any movement outside. In the midst of their movie night, Noah's shout about spotting the dog outside sliced through the calm. Startled, Lila and Christopher jumped up, spilling popcorn everywhere. Noah pointed excitedly towards the garden, his face pressed against the window as the movie continued to play, forgotten in the background. The three rushed towards the door, hearts racing with the hope of catching up to the elusive visitor. Reaching the garden, Lila and Christopher found themselves a moment too late. The quiet night greeted them, with no sign of the mysterious dog. Disheartened, they looked around, hoping it might reappear. The cool breeze whispered through the trees, the only witness to their missed opportunity. They couldn't help but wonder if their quick steps and Noah's loud excitement had driven the dog away. Walking back to the house, they realized their rushed movements and Noah's enthusiastic shouts likely scared the dog off. Christopher scratched his head, thinking aloud about what could have been done differently. Lila reassured him, suggesting they stay more alert in the future. Noah, feeling a bit guilty, promised to be quieter next time. They entered the house, leaving the door slightly ajar just in case. Back inside, Christopher had an idea. He proposed installing a security camera to keep an eye out for the dog's return. "It'll be like our little project," he said, hoping to catch a glimpse of the dog without startling it this time. Lila nodded in agreement, while Noah jumped in excitement at the thought of becoming a detective. They planned to set it up first thing in the morning. Eager for any insight into the dog's special connection, Lila agreed to the setup. The next day, she and Christopher spent the afternoon adjusting lenses and angles, ensuring the camera covered every corner of the garden. Christopher climbed up the ladder, securing the camera in place while Lila directed him from below. "Left a bit." "Perfect," she exclaimed. Once satisfied, they retreated indoors and they tested the video feed on Lila's laptop, making sure it was crisp and uninterrupted. "This has to work," Lila muttered, more to herself than to Christopher as they finished the setup. Then they sat there for a while, just watching the live feed on the screen, waiting for any sign of movement. Hoping to attract the dog, Lila placed water and food near the shed. Every now and then, she peeked from the window, checking if the dog had taken the bait. Christopher kept an eye on the live feed, ready to alert Lila at the slightest hint of the dog's presence. They each had their own task, and they were keeping their eyes open. They awaited the dog's return, hopeful the offerings would encourage its appearance. Hours turned into days, with Lila and Christopher taking turns monitoring the feed. They barely spoke, the silence between them filled with anticipation and the soft humming of the computer. The garden remained still, the food and water untouched, but they didn't lose hope. "It'll show up," Christopher reassured Lila, though his confidence waned. Days of checking the camera yielded no sign of the dog, nearly crushing Lila's hopes. They reviewed the footage daily, fast-forwarding through hours of stillness, searching for a clue. The untouched food began to spoil, and the water bowl collected leaves. Lila considered giving up, but something inside her urged to wait a bit longer. "Just a few more days," she whispered, not ready to let go of the mystery just yet. Lila was almost about to give up when the dog returned, fixating on the shed door in her garden. It paced, gaze locked on the wood, hinting at hidden secrets. Lila watched, curious and surprised. This dog couldn't really know what she was keeping in that shed, could it? She slowly opened the door and walked outside, not wanting to scare the dog away. Lila approached, her voice a gentle whisper aimed at calming the wary dog. "It's okay," she coaxed, hoping to forge a connection. The dog's ears twitched at her voice, yet it stayed put, eyes filled with caution. Lila reached out slowly, her hand an offer of peace and understanding, waiting for the dog to respond. The dog eyed Lila, its grip on the object in his mouth. It seemed aware of its importance, standing firm and alert. You see, the object it was holding was an old stuffed toy, a panda. Lila recognized it very well, but she couldn't believe that it had found its way back to her. She knew that that toy was what had led the dog to her, and more specifically, to her garden shed. Unlocking the shed, Lila felt a rush of anticipation. Stepping back from the door, she gave the dog space to enter, her heart racing with excitement. The dog, still wary, watched her intently, but it kept its distance, clutching the plush toy tightly. It did not move yet, but Lila could tell that it wanted to go inside the shed. That was what it had come for after all. Lila's gentle words and open posture encouraged the dog to venture towards the old shed, its tail wagging with cautious optimism. Step by hesitant step, it approached the doorway, sniffing the air and peering into the shadowy interior. With a final glance at Lila, the dog crossed the threshold, its nose to the ground, ready to uncover whatever mysteries lay hidden inside. Inside, the shed was a treasure trove of smells and sights. The dog moved with purpose, its nose twitching as it followed an invisible trail. Old tools, dusty furniture, and boxes filled with forgotten belongings were inspected one by one. The dog's ears perked up and its pace quickened, as if it were on the verge of an important discovery. The deeper into the shed the dog ventured, the more intense its search became. It zigzagged between the clutter, occasionally pausing to sniff more intently at a spot or to scratch gently at the floor. Lila watched from the doorway, amused and curious. She knew exactly what it was that had captured the dog's attention so fully. Eventually, the dog's quest led it to a large, slightly ajar box in the corner. Trying to open it further, the dog whined in frustration, its efforts futile against the box's weight. Turning to Lila with a look of earnest appeal in its eyes, it was clear the dog needed her help. Lila stepped forward, ready to open up the box for this sweet dog. With Lila's help, the box creaked open, revealing its contents. The dog immediately lunged inside, tail wagging furiously, and emerged with something clutched gently in its mouth. Lila knelt down as the dog approached, laying its find at her feet with a look of sheer joy. She picked it up, marveling at the significance of its discovery, while the dog danced around in excitement. Lila extended her hand, trembling as the dog approached, its tail wagging cautiously. In an instant, it licked her hand, sealing a new friendship. They were in the backyard, sunlight filtering through the leaves, highlighting the dog's eager eyes and Lila's tentative smile. Both found comfort in this unexpected connection, a silent promise of new beginnings and healed hearts. The dog had roamed, sniffed, and searched every corner of the town, driven by a newly found force. It navigated through streets and alleys, dodging crowds and cars, until it found Lila. Now, sitting in her backyard, the search seemed to have led it exactly where it needed to be. The moment was simple yet profound, as if all roads were meant to lead here. The toy panda had led the dog to Lila. This wasn't just any toy. It belonged to Max, her previous dog who had passed. The panda, a silent witness to countless days of joy and nights of comfort, now found its way back, bridging the past and the present in a tangible, heartwarming reminder. The box in the shed was where they kept Max's other old toys, and the dog must have tracked down their scent somehow. After Max passed, the family had donated his favorite toy, the beloved panda, to a local shelter. They hoped it would bring joy to another dog, never imagining it would circle back to them. The toy's journey from their home to the shelter and back into their lives felt like a twist of fate. There was no explanation for it. Lila saw it as a gentle nudge from the universe that some bonds are never truly broken. As the dog played with the panda, Lila couldn't help but laugh. The joy was infectious, a balm to her still grieving heart. This new friendship, sparked by the return of a simple toy, hinted at a deeper connection. Lila realized that sometimes life gives second chances in the most unexpected ways. Yet, this was just the beginning, with many more moments to come. Lila spent the afternoon playing fetch and running around the backyard with the dog. They took turns tossing a frisbee, and the dog would leap high to catch it, wagging its tail wildly. Afterward, they relaxed on the grass, the dog laying its head in Lila's lap as she gently stroked its fur, watching the sunset together. Deciding to make the leap, Lila opened her kitchen door wide, inviting the dog into her life. She showed it around, setting up a cozy bed in the corner of the living room and filling a bowl with water. The dog sniffed around curiously, eventually settling into its new spot with a contented sigh, looking up at Lila with trusting eyes. A visit to the vet was the next step, where the dog was pronounced in excellent health. Lila filled out forms while the dog explored the examination room, sniffing at every corner and wagging its tail at the friendly staff. The vet gave the dog a treat after the checkup, sealing their new friendship with a pat on the head. It was a day of celebration when Lila and her family signed the adoption papers, officially welcoming the dog into their hearts. They threw a small party, complete with a dog-friendly cake. The dog, wearing a new collar with a tag bearing its name, roamed among them, basking in the attention and love of its new family. The dog's arrival breathed new life into the household, bringing laughter and joy. Lila and her family spent evenings playing with the dog, teaching it new tricks and going on long walks. The house felt fuller, the atmosphere charged with the promise of new adventures and the unbreakable bond forming between them. The story of their growing family was just beginning. The dog wasted no time making itself at home, running around with an energy that filled the house with life. It wasn't long before it curled up next to its new family on the couch, nuzzling into them as if it had always belonged there. Laughter and barks echoed through the rooms, sealing the bond between them. Watching the dog chase and tumble with Max's old toys, Lila couldn't help but smile. The sight of the dog, so full of joy and unaware of the significance of its playthings, brought a lightness to her heart. It played with a carefree abandon, and for moments at a time, the house felt full again, just like in the old days. As Lila watched the dog, a sense of peace washed over her. She realized that life was moving forward, with new memories being made, even as they cherished the old ones. This new companion had brought a sense of closure and a renewed connection to Max, bridging the gap between past and present in the most unexpected way. Evenings were now spent sharing stories of Max with the dog, as if it could understand every word. They laughed over memories, and sometimes tears would sneak in, but it felt like healing. The dog would tilt its head, listening intently, becoming a part of their history and forging a link between then and now. a comforting presence amid the stories. Lila realized through this journey that life's most beautiful chapters could start unexpectedly. The arrival of the dog, once a stranger and now a cherished family member, had opened her heart to new possibilities. It taught her that even when life takes unexpected turns, there's always room for joy and new beginnings, setting the stage for more adventures together.